Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest episode of the Jungle Roar podcast, powered by Prize Picks, and of course, our great friends at CLNS Media. My pleasure to welcome back to the pod this week. It's been a while since Jeremy Rauch of Fox 19 has joined me on the JRP, as we like to call it. Jeremy Rauch works for the flagship, of course, of the Cincinnati Bengals here in town, Fox 19 Sports. Jeremy, how you been?
Been good, man. Been coaching a lot of basketball this winter. I'm coaching both my kids because I'm apparently crazy
and a good
trying
dad
to work as well.
Yeah, you're a good
they're
dad,
in fourth
Jeremy.
and second grade. Well, I appreciate that, Trags. They're in fourth and second grade, so that takes up a lot of my time right now when I'm not working. But look, it's such an important offseason for this Bengals team, one of the most important in team history. So the fact that you've invited me on, I'm honored, Trags.
All right, let's get right to it. You follow this team very closely, Jeremy. You know the ins and outs. You know the priorities, at least we feel are the priorities from the outside. We can never really truly know what's the priorities on the inside of the organization because the Brown-Blackburn family are very tight-lipped and always have been. Kudos to them for running their ship that way because I think there's a lot to be said for not having a lot of leaks. But the other flip side of that is you don't know where they're going necessarily all the time. But I think this year we know the Bengals go in to the Combine week this week, which starts on Tuesday in Indianapolis, with a priority of addressing the front seven on the defense and the interior line on offense, right?
Absolutely. What more could you want this year, Trags, as you go into the NFL Combine and the draft and all this that awaits for the Bengals in the next couple of months? But you look at the defensive line in this draft, this class is so loaded that there's been so much talk about you can get guys that might have been a first-round pick last year that might even be a second-round availability this year. There's things like that because there's so much depth there, and that's what the Bengals need. I think that's a huge priority for this team. And on the O-line as well, obviously you're looking at guard. I don't know if the Bengals are going to go for a guard in the first round if they value that enough. But I think you're right on the mark there, talking about both sides of the ball there, the offensive line, the defensive line. The thing that I cannot shake, Trags, is when I watch the Eagles and I watch what happened in the Super Bowl and how they won, is the strength that they had on the O-line and the D-line. I know they view things a little differently than the Bengals do, and I think Bengals fans have been so attached to this idea of, well, they paid everyone. They paid everyone and made it work, and we can do the same thing. That blueprint is not easy to just copy and paste. Drafting is a huge part of that, but I do think that philosophy, at least at the start, Trags, to beef up the D-line, which they have to do no matter what, and then fix the guard spots on the offensive line, I think has to be priority number 1 and 1A going into this.
All right, we're going to throw a couple of names out there because you mentioned the defensive tackle position. And I think, to me, if you're talking about an area in terms of just the draft, not free agency, but the draft, Kenneth Grant of Michigan, Deontay Walker of Kentucky, Tyleik Williams of the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, Jordan Phillips of Maryland, Nazir Stackhouse of Georgia, and Jamari Caldwell of Oregon. Those are the top 6 on one particular draft board that I've been doing some research on. That's a lot of quality depth along the defensive tackle position. And look, the Combine in Indianapolis isn't necessarily what it used to be, but still, it's not about the workouts. And that's one thing I want a lot of fans to understand. I think a lot of savvy fans do understand that now, but maybe the common fan isn't aware that, workouts take place. There's so much focus on the 40 times at Indy, but it's the opportunity to sit down with these guys for, let's say 15 minutes at a time if you select certain players and to interview and get an idea of where their head's at, how prepared mentally are they to compete in the NFL. Because as we found out, and look, I'll just bring up the name Jermaine Burton. Was he as mature and emotionally ready to handle the NFL? Well, his behavior this year probably would indicate he wasn't. So the Bengals want to, and every other NFL team wants to use this opportunity this week in Indianapolis to really begin digging deep on some of these players that have caught their eye in college film.
Absolutely. I mean, you could just look at the blueprint since Zach Taylor arrived, and you know this as well, Trags. He's looking for guys who are leaders on the team. He's looking for captains. You know, if it's between 1, 2, or 3 players that you think the Bengals might go after, we know now covering this Bengals team under Zach Taylor to find the ones that were leaders in the locker room, that were captains, that maybe were winning a conference championship or a national championship, or were in that kind of conversation, right? Those kinds of players are the guys that the Bengals are going to go after. You mentioned Jermaine Burton. That's a bit of an outlier. And I think Zach Taylor got sucked into the idea of what his talent could be, which is why we saw the excitement of him kind of slamming the table when they got him, because they thought, who's going to go after this guy? Who's going to make that leap? And if he's still there when we have a chance to go get him, we're going to take a gamble on this guy. But this team, I think, really needs to be careful with those kind of things going forward. And that's a red flag. We all know that in Jermaine Burton. It's just that idea of finding a guy that could be a fix right now because there's a lot of enticing things about him. This team in recent years has not done well finding guys that are immediate fix out of the draft. It's just not worked out for this team. When you lose big-time players, you lose guys like Jesse Bates, fill in the blank. We all know all the players they've lost. They have not done well chasing guys in the draft to be that immediate fix. Amarius Mims worked out pretty well outside of a couple of injury issues. He was phenomenal for them. But I don't think that can be the plan for this team going forward. You want to bring in guys that are leaders, that are captains, that are champions, that have all that going for them, but aren't necessarily that they don't need to rely on right away. And to me, that speaks to probably something bigger picture that I might get to down the line here in our chat, Trags, about how they should approach this offseason. But look, the bottom line is that it's got to be guys that they believe are going to be core pieces of the locker room. Jermaine Burton, again, just to point him out, is not one of those guys, and they shouldn't chase that way again, no matter what the spot is that they want to fill.
Keep that in mind. I want to get right back to that, Jeremy. We're speaking with Jeremy Rauch of Fox 19 Sports here in Cincinnati, the official flagship station of the Cincinnati Bengals. Want to tell you about Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions with a B of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made real daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You heard that right, 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup is not perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and, yes, secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, Jeremy. Taco Tuesday is one of their great events at Prize Picks and great promotions. It happens, of course, each Tuesday. Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this basketball season. Which players are going to go off? Which ones are not? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Back with Jeremy Rauch of Fox 19 Sports here in Cincinnati. All right, Jeremy, you teased it before our break. What is it that the Bengals really need to keep forefront in their mind this offseason in terms of roster building?
So I don't want to go viral here with a bad take on the Bengals and what they should do.
That's why we do this. It's a podcast, Jeremy. You can say anything you want.
Look, this is I'm on this to be to share my opinion, and I don't get to always do that on TV. So I would just tell you this, man. Like, the one thing I can't shake, Trags, as I look at not just the Eagles but recent champions in the NFL, you go back 10 of the last 12 Super Bowl champions had a top 10 defense. Outlier would be, for one, the Rams, who beat the Bengals in 2021. The Bengals also would have been an outlier in that department had they won in 2021. I think in points per game, they were 16th that year. And so those are some outliers. The Bengals defense was very solid that year and great at takeaways. We know that. But to me, I can't shake the fact that it relies on defense. Champions rely on defense. Like, this is not a new thing, right? You think about Ohio State. I know I'm repping the hoodie right now by wearing the Buckeyes 9-time national championships hoodie. But like the way Ohio State won this year wasn't because of Will Howard, right? Will Howard was a great fit for that team. Jeremiah Smith is a great wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka, Travion, Quinshon Judkins, you go down the line. But that defense was number one in the country, and they won the championship that way. To me, it is just you put so much emphasis on that defense, especially in the NFL in recent years. Think about the Kansas City Chiefs and the way they've won. Is Patrick Mahomes going to be a Hall of Famer? Absolutely he is. Is he a great quarterback? Absolutely he is. But those defenses and what they've done with Steve Spagnuolo in recent years has been a superpower for them. So here's my bottom line, Trags. To me, Bengals fans and even some of the media in some ways, we've fallen in love with this idea of what the Bengals were offensively last year, what they could be, what they're supposed to be. When you think about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and even T. Higgins having a career high in touchdowns and down the line of the offense and what they were. And it wasn't good enough to make the playoffs. So part of that fix is bringing in a new defensive coordinator, Al Golden, to hopefully help these young guys change the scheme, simplify, make them play faster. But to me, it's not just that. I know Bengals fans want to pay everyone and keep the band together, even Mike Gesicki, right, as Joe Burrow has talked about. But sometimes you need to go away from just what the fans want and do what is best for the team. And not even sometimes, but probably most of the time. And to me, that is making sure, no matter what, Trags, that the defense is right. To me, that is the main thing. I would prioritize that over even keeping T. Higgins. I understand keeping the band together is a lot of fun. But to me, offense is great. Defense is ultimate when it comes to winning championships. And that's what the Bengals have to get right. And right next to that, as we talked about, is the offensive line. Then we can start talking about everything else. But to me, that has to be paramount, has to be the biggest thing they address this offseason.
Okay, here's my counter to that. And it's a very logical, reasonable, and understandable take, Jeremy. I'm not here to say that's ridiculous, that's garbage.
Come on with it.
That's BS. However, the Bengals are not in a position to become the Philadelphia Eagles or the Ohio State Buckeyes because they don't have the talent there. They do have the talent on the offensive side, and with Jamar Chase at 25 and T. Higgins at 26 going into next year, you have two premium elite players, not in the prime of their career, entering the prime of their career, having already demonstrated that they are, well, Jamar had the best season of any wide receiver in football this year, period, hands down, triple crown, no argument there. But if T. Higgins can get on the field with Jamar, it makes T. Higgins that much more impressive and that much more effective, especially in this offense. You're not going to rob Peter to pay Paul, as the expression goes. And I think in your way of thinking, the Bengals would, let's say, not pay T. Higgins and use the money to get a free agent somewhere else. Well, there's no guarantee based on how, let's just look at Sheldon Rankins. That free agent signing was a bust for a number of different reasons. Health, certainly part of that. He had a viral infection that really, knocked him out for the second half of the season last year. But the Bengals have to do a better job, Jeremy, of drafting. And to me, that's what this comes down to. Procuring the right players, having scouts. That's what the Eagles and Howie Roseman did. Mm-hmm. They hit on 5 starters who were either rookies this year or second-year players. 5 starters and 2 other players in their secondary who are rotational key pieces. That's 7 of the 11 players who are in their first or second years. The Bengals can't say that right now. Maybe, certainly some of the drafts draft picks over the last couple of years start to grow into that role this year, and we'll certainly find that out. But the Bengals have to do a better job, I think we all agree, on drafting defensive players. So my whole long-winded point here, Jeremy, is you would love to be the Ohio State Buckeyes or the Philadelphia Eagles and absolutely dominate with the pass rush that both of those teams did to win their championship games. If you go back to the Ohio State game against Notre Dame, Ohio State's defense and pass rush in that first half was the reason they were able to jump out on top and really grab hold of that game before halftime. Same with the Eagles, right? I mean, they made Patrick Mahomes' life miserable. Bengals have to find a way to have a young, effective defense that can disrupt an offense.
They do. I agree with you. And those are all valid points. And it's not like you can just say, well, we're not going to pay T. Higgins and we're not going to pay Mike Gesicki, and we're going to figure out how to switch that to the defense and go find all these stars that we hope are going to work out. I know it's not that simple. But as we talk about just keeping the band together, I think sometimes because Joe Burrow has pushed so hard for it, because fans are so triggered by the fact that what if Joe Burrow is Carson Palmer? What if he does the exact same thing and doesn't get his way? It is also on the organization, unless LeBron James is running it, and then do whatever LeBron says.
Right.
And I know Joe Burrow has that kind of impact in some ways in Cincinnati. He's in meetings. He's very involved. When he signed his contract, there was a kind of an agreement of we'll find a way to make this work with Jamar and T. And I'm not saying ship T off and don't get it done with T.
Right.
But when you're talking about the whole big picture, the pieces of the pie, as Duke Tobin likes to talk about, does it mean that we keep everyone together, including Mike Gesicki? Well, maybe Mike doesn't stick around, right? Maybe you allocate that money, reallocate it somehow another way. I believe that another tight end in some way, somehow, that Joe Burrow can find the ball to get to him and find a way to get the ball to him and make it work. I'm just saying when you get down to those nitty-gritty things, can you move money to the defense and find a way to spend it that way to beef that up a little more? That's where I would prioritize stuff. It doesn't even necessarily mean trading Trey Hendrickson to try to get more guys or more draft picks. I don't mean that even. I'm just saying when it comes down to some of the small decisions, when Joe Burrow is saying, I want all these things, sometimes even though Joe Burrow is a massive, massive part of the organization, a lot would argue the most important piece, it doesn't mean like sometimes
he is. He absolutely is the most important.
He is, but I'm saying like sometimes a parent has to tell a kid like, hey, these are great. I'm glad that you want all these things, but you can't have everything. Like sometimes there has to be a parent in the room. And there just has to be that. Now, Bengals fans would say, I don't trust the parents in the room right now. I don't know that I trust what they're going to do, right? Like, so the parent in the room has to make good decisions. But to me, it can't be just keep the whole band together, run it back, and hope that it works better next year with the defense having Al Golden and maybe another year under guys like Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson and all the other guys. To me, they need to start to shift a little bit of that mindset towards beefing up that defense, even if it's just a little bit of what they do, even if it's just not one guy that they sign, to start thinking more defensively, because it can't just be offense reigns supreme because Joe Burrow is the most important piece in the organization. It has to be a bit of that defensive push back again. And to me, somehow, some way, they got to get there.
Okay, what do you do with Trey Hendrickson? You mentioned him. Obviously a big piece of the puzzle regarding the Bengals offseason and how everything comes together or doesn't come together regarding Jamar, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson involves what you do, how much money, how long of a contract do you offer Trey Hendrickson? What would you do, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing with Trey Hendrickson. I would point to a little bit what FC Cincinnati just did, okay? And so talking with a lot of the people with the orange and blue, the front office, guys like Jeff Birding, Lucho Acosta was becoming a bit of a problem this offseason. Not that Trey Hendrickson has become that. I'm not saying he has one bit. But they have a guy who was an MVP, who was at the top of his game, but they viewed as potentially hitting some years in the next couple of years that were not going to be his best years anymore, his prime. And so they were trying to find a way to make things work. And they made a really good business decision, in my mind, to come to an agreement in some ways with him, move on from him, and get younger with a guy like Evander, who's 26, who's in his prime, who has been a finalist for the MVP and is a guy who's like on the up and come still. And so to me, that's the best way to do business, to find a way to get younger and find a guy that's in his prime, that's on the come up. I'm not saying that has to happen now for the Bengals to move on from Trey, to trade him, but it's time to start thinking about that. Trey Hendrickson has been phenomenal. His numbers have been great. We know he's among the best in the game right now. How much longer can that last? I don't know. So when you ask me about a contract, Trags, I would say 2 years, and I wouldn't go beyond that, honestly, for Trey Hendrickson right now. If they're going to try to keep him, and he's going to want a lot of money because he's earned that. I just don't know how much longer you let that play out if you do keep him around.
The big issue is his age. Would rather, I think this is true, Jeremy, in any sport, you'd rather let a guy go too soon than hold on to him too late, especially in the financial environment that you are in a salary cap era. If you hold on to a guy too long and he falls off a cliff, and look, defensive ends do that, especially in the National Football League. The way it is constructed now, they are so geared towards getting after the quarterback. They fight through injury, and certainly Trey Hendrickson has done that. He has been one of the best Bengals in the last 10 years.
Phenomenal.
There's no question about that. His effort, his desire to be on the field at all times, and there's no doubt that the Bengals have leaned on him heavily. He could have been the Defensive Player of the Year last year in the National Football League. I mean, when you lead the league in sacks and play the way he does, he certainly was in that conversation. But it's a hard one for Bengal fans to swallow.
I know.
If somehow they don't get T done and they don't get Trey done because the money doesn't make sense for the Bengals in the way they have things budgeted for either player, to me, that's the worst case scenario. And I wonder what the Bengals do in that particular situation.
I would agree. And that's why when and if you listen to kind of like my whole argument around this, it's not just like, all right, beef up the defense, only sign Jamar Chase. And that is not my argument, because you're right, Trags. It would be a disaster if they somehow don't get Trey or T done. Like if both of those guys are playing for another team next year, it's a disaster scenario. When I talk about how they start to kind of lean things defensively in the way they think and the way they approach free agency and all those other things, it's just one of those things to me they got to make a hard decision on, including Mike Gesicki as well. So I think that's part of the domino effect. It would be really difficult to see Trey Hendrickson go, considering what he's been. There's just so many things, Trags, you know this, that trigger Bengals fans, and I get it. When I'm talking to you, I get it, man, because Andrew Whitworth is one of those examples. It's one of those guys that the Bengals said, hey, just so you know, Whit, like we're drafting guys to come fill your spot. You're getting up there in your years. This might be the end for you. And the nightmare scenario is you face him in the Super Bowl a few years down the line and he beats you. And that's like Bengals fans are like, I don't want to see Trey Hendrickson somewhere else in a championship game that we lose and then he gets his moment. Like I totally get that. But the harder part of this conversation, Trags, is what we started with, is the drafting. And you're talking about how the Eagles draft and how they approach the draft and how they've hit in the draft. Well, the Chiefs have also hit really well in the draft. Like there are other teams at the top that have done really well in that department. That's where this has to swing. It can't be, and I hate to name a name, but it can't be Miles Murphy, where for a guy that covers football for a living, that doesn't play football for a living, when I see the guy, my first look at him in person, my initial reaction is, this guy is not a first-round defensive end. And to me, like, the decision makers in the building have to be better at those kinds of things. Yep. And it's not just the look of the guy sometimes when you see him on the field the first time. It's the conversations with the guy where you wonder, does he have that kind of crazy to do what Trey Hendrickson does, right? Like the elite pass rushers in the game. I don't know that he has that. And now that we've seen a few years of that, we realize that he doesn't have that, at least not in the role that he's been placed in. So they have to do a better job of vetting that and wondering, is this guy a leader? Is this guy a captain? Yes, but also, is he a guy that scares people on the football field at that position? Those kind of conversations have to lead to better draft picks.
All right, what do you have coming up on Fox 19, Jeremy, and how will you be handling your coverage as a team of the NFL Combine this coming week in Indianapolis?
Glad you asked, Trags. Yeah, we have big plans this week. Look, as the Bengals flagship station, we really do, even though I've shared my opinions for the last 20, 30 minutes about the Bengals right now, we do really feel responsible to this team, to covering it well, to covering it the best we possibly can. And so we'll be there for Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin. Gabby and Reagan are making the trip on our sports team. We're also making other trips this week to talk to guys like Corey Kiner, obviously out of Roger Bacon, and UC, a running back that, who knows, could be enticing in the draft. I already did a sit down with Luke Kandra out of Elder, and also UC, a guard, by the way, projected day 3 picks. So sometimes the Bengals have done well drafting later offensive linemen. So that's a guy to watch. So we're doing some of those conversations. And a lot of this week, Trags, is going to culminate in a NFL draft / combine special that we're doing on Sunday night. Let me get my dates right here. March 2nd, Sunday night at 11:30 p.m. So we used to have like our Bengals breakdown show. So we're doing a combine special on that night. And that'll feature a lot of the storylines of the week, guys to watch, and not just that, local products that are also involved in the draft process. So we're really excited about that and just want to make sure people kind of get the full scope of everything this week is. And we know it means a lot to fans as well.
So if you're watching the Oscars on March 2nd and the movie of the year, the best picture is announced, be sure to flip on over to Fox 19 and they'll have you covered. How's that for a off-the-cuff promo, huh?
Trags, I love you, man. Look, I'm glad that you are better at takes than I am because you do this for a living, and I just talk about sports for 2 minutes on TV sometimes. But it was an honor to come on here, man. And look, I can't say it enough. I can't say it enough. I just want this team to somehow find a way to get better defensively. And that is not different from what Bengals fans want or the offensive players from last year who understand that they would have potentially had a deep run if the defense was a tick better.
No question. He is Jeremy Rauch, does a fabulous job covering all things Cincinnati sports for Fox 19 and fox19.com. Correct? I got the website right?
You got it.
All right. He's Jeremy Rauch. My name is Mike Petralia. Trags, thanks for watching and listening to this episode of the Jungle Roar podcast, powered by our great friends at Prize Picks and, of course, CLNS Media. Until next time, keep that jungle roaring.